This is Spock's Brain, who's calling in from Texas. Like the call sign there, Spock's Brain. You are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, happy Star Trek Day.
Happy Star Trek
You
Day.
do
I
know
did not realize it was Star Trek Day,
this
but
is
now
the
I know.
anniversary. This is the anniversary of the premiere of Star Trek in 1966.
Oh. Wow. The more you know. There's a random fun fact for you.
There we go.
I like it.
Well,
Spock's Brain, how can we help
a
you
lot
today?
of people. Well, first I want to reply to the chiropractic thing. The pseudoscience behind chiropractic is utter bullshit. Although I have gotten some serious relief from going to chiropractors.
Yeah, this is why I thought this would be a controversial truth bomb, because I know from just casual conversations with people that there are folks who totally think chiropractors do real stuff and think that chiropractor stuff is just full of nonsense, but will still go to one anyway because it makes them feel good. So there's definitely like a weird cross section there.
The pseudoscience behind it is bullshit. But believe me, I have walked out of a chiropractor's office feeling a lot better from having my back cracked or my hip pulled or whatever. And I've actually kind of learned to do that for people. It's not rocket science. You just put that bone a little bit. No, but the whole nerve
don't do it. Don't do it. Don't become the next Daniel David Palmer. Okay, I'm on to you. All right. If I see any chiropractor businesses with Dr. Spock's Brain on them, I'm gonna call you out.
It's not Dr. Spock. It's a Mr. Spock. You scientifically illiterate person.
No, blew it.
What I really called about was to talk.
And on Star Trek Day too.
Yeah.
Sorry, Spock's
on
Brain.
Star Trek Day. That's why I chose Spock's Brain. We've talked a lot of times. You kind of know who I am, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with your voice. I choose as a rule to refer to whatever call sign you call in on the day of the show. But I may or may not have talked to you before. Yes.
I am Coyote Boy.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's anyway, on you. That's on you to disclose. I have no obligation to do that. But yes.
You're not exposing me. Okay. So.
Oh no, Spock's Brain, are you there? Oh, there you go. We lost you there for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. And now I'm forgetting. Oh, it's oh God. Give me a second here. Hold on.
Oh no. Well, here, I'll tell you what the call screener wrote for you. Okay. So they wrote that you were calling about reconnecting with liberal and progressive Christians. And you said that there are good progressive Christians that could benefit the atheist movement. Does that sound familiar?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I went back to my home church that I grew up in, and it's a Disciples of Christ church, which is a very moderate, vanilla, liberal church, and I made a lot of connections, and I'm accepted even as a professing atheist there. How weird is that?
That's awesome.
That's really
awesome.
Cool.
Because we have common goals and values. To at that church wants to see Christian nationalism or forced prayer in school, stuff like that. And I've gotten in some online comment fights with atheists who say, no, they're Christians, they're evil, they're terrible. I'm like, no, not. There are plenty of Christians who are moderate and liberal and believe the same things we believe. So I don't know how this will work out, but I'm going to stay in contact and going to this church because I think they could use a atheist humanist up there to just to inform them,
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but Scott, I want you to take the reins first. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very much in favor of people working together to accomplish things. We had the super chat earlier that says, "Is the world getting better?" And I think that if as much as the world is getting better has to do with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different belief systems, different continents, different countries, starting to work together as we get better at communicating, as our technology develops. The world, they have that phrase, the world's shrinking, right? The world, and it's not literally shrinking, but what it means is that we're able to connect with other parts of the world much more easily. And I think that people working together is going to be a key if we, if humanity wants to make a good, successful go out of this thing. And I kudos to you for reaching out and for being available in that way. I think that, some of my most interesting conversations are with, people that believe differently than myself. And, it gives me an opportunity to grow. And I'm also on the nonprofits. And when I'm on that show, I'm talking to people that are mostly in agreement with me. And I like to say, well, we need that as people. We need to talk to people that are kind of in our same vein, that kind of go in the same direction, because that's kind of like a healing environment. But when we're talking about growth, we need to be able to challenge ourselves. Sorry, go ahead,
yes,
Spock's brain.
Yes, those productive.
Yeah, they
said a number of times this week for even saying that some Christians are not total assholes. And I said I share common values and goals with these moderate Christians. I hate to see the atheist community fall into the same trap as the radical fundamentalists.
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue, okay? Because politically speaking, I'm not afraid of the moderate Christian or the liberal Christian, right? I am afraid of the fundamentalist Christian. I am afraid of the Christian nationalists. I am afraid of the Christians who have been campaigning for years to take away women's rights or people's rights to abortion, people's rights to freedom from religion in public spaces, including public schools, right? I mean, this is the stuff that the ACA has had has had a fight in for years, right? So like those are the ones that we are the most disagreement with, and where we're going to find the least common values. The fact that I can find common values with other Christians is great, but the secret is, to me at least, is that it's not because of Christianity that we find our common values. It's because we both believe in human decency, or we both believe in thinking about things through, right? And it's like, you don't need Christianity for any of that. I think that's the biggest problem. So, if you can find common values with other human beings that are in your immediate vicinity, that's great. That's wonderful. And I absolutely encourage those relationships. But I don't want to legitimize Christianity in any way. In other words, if I get invited to a Christian podcast, or if I get invited to talk to some Christians on whatever their show, my goal on there is not to say, wow, even we Christians can talk to atheists too, and maybe that, bolsters us in our position a little bit. It's for me to say, no, we share some stuff, but you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong on some of this stuff.
There are some areas that are not shared, definitely.
Yeah, I'm going to call you out for that. So it's a tight rope to walk on. And yeah, people on the internet, maybe not so nuanced in their communication. Sure, I agree with you with that. But it's tough because, I mean, historically, right, Christianity has not had liberal values in any way whatsoever. It has not supported democracy historically, has not supported gay rights, has not supported lots of things that I support. So the fact that there are Christians who may have some newer interpretations, I mean, that's great. But it might be ahistorical, and maybe that's okay. I mean, Christianity's all made up anyway, right? But
excuse me. Let me stop you right there. You're umbrellaing a lot of issues. There were many liberal Christian denominations in the early 1800s. Why are you grouping them all together?
Why am I grouping them all together? Well, because I mean, I grew up as a Baptist. Okay, those were the Christians that the Baptists told me to warn about. You see what I'm saying? Even other Christians don't trust those kinds of Christians, because there is not there's not a uniform interpretation of this text, and that's the big problem, right? How am I supposed to say I agree with the group of people?
Why did you insist that Christians are? Why did you umbrella Christians in those terms? There have been many liberal Christian movements.
There have been many
Martin W. Stone movement, the Unitarian Universalists.
Yes,
there have been. They haven't been very popular, and they haven't had a big following. But there have been Christians who have been willing to be more open-minded.
The vast majority
this is what I've been fighting.
for the longest period of time, right? The biggest Christian populations you had were under the authority of the Catholic Church. And outside of that, you had the Eastern Orthodox Church, right? So before
Yes.
Protestantism,
Yes.
you didn't have liberal Christian movements. You had maybe some monasteries that ran some things differently than others, but this wasn't a thing. Again, this is a newer historical phenomenon. For the vast majority of Christianity's history, these liberal Christian movements did not exist. They were newer interpretations of the text. Now, again, I want to clarify here. I'm not saying that's bad. In fact, if anything, that's a great thing. I'd rather people, again, share some of those same values than me. But the problem is, it's an inconsistent method into getting to those values. I don't want people to have those values because they think Jesus was a good guy. I want them to have those values because being a good person is a worthy ends within itself. And that's just not something that Christianity in general seems to teach, even amongst the liberal Christians.
How do you know that moderate liberal Christians don't believe that it's just a good idea?
I mean, some of them do. Don't get me wrong, but Spock's Brain, I've had liberal Christian guests on this show.
Thing.
Listen, you want to talk?
Okay.
We're talking about a population of people, Spock's Brain, of over 2 billion people. Yeah, we're going to find exceptions to the rule all over the place. But if we're playing a numbers game here, right? And if we're talking about the issues that matter here, yeah, the fundamentalist Christians have that loud voice and they are dominating the political conversation. So that's going to be my primary concern, is opposing that voice. If the liberal Christians want to join me in that fight, that's great. But they're I don't know, they don't tend to call into this show. I'll tell you that. Anyway, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make 2 points here. One is to what Spock's Brain was saying, and that yes, there have been some liberal Christian groups, and there still are today. But I think an argument can be made that the impetus, the motivation for liberalizing or softening, or however you want to describe it, changing of the fundamental beliefs, I think, is contact with people that are outside of the religion, contact with other human beings. We saw, we see this kind of thing happening every day as minority groups become more visible. People realize that they have friends that are atheists, that they already respect and care about and trust and know. And so I think that we could argue that it's exactly what you're doing. It's those bridges that I think are helping some of the more severe Christian groups. Second point, to what Dan was saying, yes, there are, and boy, it's slipping out of my brain. Yes, it is the more fundamentalist groups that are the reason that we have shows like this, right? We don't want to be, we don't want to have religion legislated to us. We don't want to, I'm not worried about breaking the 10 commandments and stuff like this, but I think that on the same token, that one of our best tools, I think, for interacting with those, how can we make those groups better, is by interacting. Showing, oh yeah, you've known me your whole life, and you've never thought I was immoral before. What's the difference now?
Can I stop you for a second?
Yep,
I'm not
go ahead.
suggesting that every atheist should go to church, but I had a wonderful experience as a 30-year atheist going back to my home church. I found people who didn't believe in, a global flood, who were open to biblical scholarship, who understood. I had a wonderful experience back there, and I think maybe some skeptics and other doubters might want to make a few more connections with the moderate Christians, because I don't think many of them know any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be the case, right? That might be the case. I can certainly tell you, as someone who grew up in the middle of Texas, right? And not Austin, Texas, Waco, Texas. Okay. I didn't know a lot of moderate liberal Christians, right? They were pretty few and far in between in my radius. So the fact that I learned more about that existence and learned more about things like liberation theology, learning about theopoetics. Holy shit. You want to talk about liberal Christianity? There's some liberal Christianity for you. There's a lot of interesting theological grounds that you could make a case for in terms of Jesus's own personal theology an interpretation of spirituality, right? I could think you could make a good case that Jesus could have some liberal tendencies to him. And I'm being completely serious when I say that, but the text is what's made up of the interpreter, right? At the end of the day, it's the interpreter that's going to have that control. And look, if you have that experience, that's great, that's wonderful. I also, for every person that has your experience where they go back to church and they meet some great people, I have callers every week that tell me that they've been traumatized by the church groups that they have been to and have grown up by. And you know what? I don't think they have to give anybody a second chance. If anything,
Well,
the church owes them an
is
apology,
Texas.
right?
It is Texas.
The church owes them. I want the church to do some reparations for the work that's done there. I don't feel like I need to do some defense work for the churches and say, well, actually, some of them are all right, right? Like the power differential there is just is too great to ignore, in my opinion. So,
well, I've had an opportunity to speak at a church once, and I had a very positive experience. I didn't. It was they were having this science and faith kind of series, and so they would invite somebody to come in and talk about the science, and then they'd have somebody else talk about the faith. And so I went in and I talked about the Big Bang, and to Dan's point, I didn't have to. They didn't ask me. They knew I was an atheist going in, and they didn't ask me to pull any punches or anything like that. I had the opportunity to say however I wanted, and I presented my information. You don't have to, talking to somebody doesn't mean you have to. It's not a tacit agreement to follow their beliefs or to endorse their beliefs or to even acknowledge their beliefs. I mean, there are things that we have in common, and I think that positive steps can be made by focusing on those commonalities. Not to say that I disagree entirely with what Dan was saying too. There are people that have had very negative experiences, and it's gonna come down to the individual people involved and their attitudes towards others. When you were, I would ask that of you, Spock's Brain, when you were working with, when you were going to that church, and you said that they knew that you were an atheist. Was that right? And then so how did they treat you? Were you treated as somebody that was to be converted? Were you treated as, the spawn of Satan or an enemy, or were you treated as just here's a human being, let's talk to this human being?
That's kind of my point. I didn't shout out loud, I don't believe in God, but I made a few points. I put a few feelers out, and I found them open to biblical scholarship, and they weren't anti-intellectual. They weren't anti-science. So, I mean, I've only been there 3 weeks now, so give me a break. But this is a I don't know how much you know about the Disciples of Christ Church.
Mm-hmm. I'm aware.
Ever heard of that?
I dated a girl from Disciples of Christ. No comment on that.
Okay, I'm sure you got laid, but anyway, no. The Disciples of Christ is a very vanilla, progressive, modern church, and I was happy to find that was still the case when I went back there. I grew up in that church from the time I was 5 to 16. Spent a lot of years in that church, and we had a fundamentalist, charismatic split in the church, and sadly, I was on the wrong side of that fight. I was speaking in tongues and crap like that, and I went to TCU and became a religion major and quickly became an atheist. So that's my story. So I think that, again, I got a lot of blowback this week for defending progressive and moderate Christians as having the same values as many skeptics, humanists, and atheists do, just because they're Christian. Go meet them. Go talk to them. Go listen to them.
I hear what you're saying, and I get that sense of frustration too, right? Where I do think people, especially in the atheist community, paint way too broad of a brush of Christianity that doesn't capture the individual experience too well, and maybe is more reflective of their own personal experience rather than Christianity as a whole. But I'm done with doing defense for the Christians. If anything, they should be doing defense for me, is how I feel about it, which is a very cynical take. But look, there's one atheist community of Austin how many churches are here in Austin? You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about going to find Christian community wherever I go in the United States. It's still a struggle for non-believers to even meet up with people, like-minded folks, let alone have to worry about finding a church where they may or may not accept them for who they are, right? Like that's a danger for a lot of people. It's not as accessible for some folks as it is for others. So it is a complicated subject there.
You make a great point. I just want to make it clear to some vehement atheists: not every Christian is the enemy.
You cut out there for just a second. What did you say?
I said not every Christian is the enemy. There are plenty of Christians who believe many of the same things that we skeptics, humanists, atheists believe and work for. So
I hope so.
Don't convert every theist to the cross-off category.
I mean, I certainly don't. I certainly know Christians. I mean, not Christians. I certainly know atheists who do, and I agree with you. I think that's wrong. But it's kind of like how far should we cast those open arms to the Christian community? I don't know. I think that's going to be a personal question that only individual people can answer. I don't know if there's ever going to be something that we could all come to agreement with. But
that's a great question.
Because we gotta move on with the show here. I am going to let you go here. I do appreciate you calling in, and I think it's a great topic. I really do. And I'm glad you brought it up because I agree. I do share your frustrations. If I have made that clear, like I think people are way too ignorant, quite frankly, on some of the stuff that they say. Doesn't mean they're not completely off base though.
Thank you very much for the call.